A USDA employee and 5 other people are charged in what authorities are calling one of the largest food stamp frauds in U.S. history.
America, the person responsible for catching food stamp fraud just got sentenced to 2 years in prison for running one of the largest food stamp frauds in U.S. history. Arlasa Davis was a longtime USDA employee who worked into the division specifically tasked with identifying SNAP fraud. She didn't just bypass the system, she sold the keys to it. Davis used her personal cell phone to photograph confidential EBT license numbers and funneled them to a criminal ring that generated over $66 million in unauthorized transactions. But here's what should terrify you. This insider fraud is just one piece of a $12 billion annual theft problem that's destroying the SNAP program. What is up, guys? Tyson DeLaCruz here. Thank you so much for rocking with me. This is the fox and the henhouse paradox. The person catching the thieves is the biggest thief of them all. And what we're seeing in 2025 is a complete overhaul of the food stamp system because the fraud has gotten so out of control. Let me break down the absolute insanity of what Arlasa Davis did. She was a veteran USDA employee working within the very division responsible for identifying SNAP fraud. Her job was to catch criminals stealing food stamp programs. Instead, obviously, she became the architect of one of the largest food stamp frauds in American history.
6 people are now charged with a huge fraud and bribery scam targeting food stamps. Listen to this. One of the arrested people in this, a USA employee, that's the government agency that oversees food stamp benefits.
Here's how this scheme worked. Davis had privileged access to federal systems that contained confidential EBT license numbers, the unique identifiers that allow stores to process SNAP transactions. She would photograph handwritten lists of these license numbers with her personal cell phone. These weren't random numbers, obviously. These were legitimate license numbers intended for qualifying stores.
Arlasa Davis is the USDA employee accused in the case. She faces additional charges of bribery and honest services fraud. A U.S. attorney says Davis betrayed the public trust by selling confidential government information to the very criminals she was supposed to catch.
Davis then funneled these stolen license numbers to middlemen who sold them to co-conspirators, specifically Michael Kehoe and his network. Kehoe used those license numbers to fraudulently obtain EBT terminals for stores that were not authorized by the USDA to process SNAP transactions. And here's where it gets really sophisticated. These weren't legitimate grocery stores or supermarkets. Kehoe's network supplied approximately 160 unauthorized EBT terminals to smoke shops and bodegas across New York. Think about that. Smoke shops processing food stamp transactions. These locations should have never had EBT terminals in the first place.
But when you've got employees that, basically don't follow the law, then we've got to fix it. And that's what we're doing. There's going to be real consequences for breaking the law across America's federal government with President Trump, but this is just one of many more to come.
The scheme generated over $66 million in unauthorized SNAP transactions. That is $66 million in taxpayer money that was supposed to feed low-income families. Instead, it lined the pockets of these particular criminals. In return of selling those confidential license numbers, Davis received substantial bribes. But here's what shows how calculated this operation was. The bribes were never called payments or kickbacks in their communication. They were disguised in text messages as birthday gifts and flowers. This wasn't sloppy criminal activity. This was a sophisticated operation using coded language to avoid potential detection. When investigators finally cracked the case, they found communications where Davis's bribes were referred to as innocent-sounding quote-unquote gifts.
They are all charged with conspiracy to steal government funds and to misappropriate USDA benefits. Arlasa Davis is the USDA employee accused in the case. She faces additional charges of bribery and honest services fraud.
The honest services fraud charge is particularly damning because it recognizes that she violated her duty to serve her public honestly. On December 22nd, 2025, U.S. District Judge Jed Rakoff sentenced Davis to 24 months in prison. But here's the number that's going to drop your jaw. She was ordered to pay $36 million in restitutions. That's her share of the $66 million scheme, which unfortunately we'll probably never even see. Acting U.S. Attorney Sean S. Buckley said Davis exploited her role as a government employee to enrich herself while undermining a program designed to help New York families in need. This conviction and sentence sends a clear message that exploitation of funds intended for families will result in serious consequences. Davis also had to forfeit $48,000 in cash from her bank account, probably from the cash that she got from these particular gains, and that's all that she had. The Davis case is just the tip of the iceberg here. What's happening in 2025 and will continue to happen through 2026 and through Trump's term, a complete overhaul of the SNAP program, because the fraud has gotten so out of control that the system is fundamentally broken.
The Trump administration's patience is wearing thin after months of waiting for Democrat-led states to turn over data on their SNAP benefit recipients. 28 states and Guam have provided the files, but about 21 states are still holding out.
In late 2025, USDA Secretary Brooke Rollins issued a directive requiring all 40 million SNAP recipients to reapply for benefits. And the reasons behind this are kind of shocking. A 2025 federal audit found that 186,000 deceased individuals and 500,000 duplicate recipients were still on active rolls with SNAP. Think about that. Nearly 200,000 dead people were still receiving food stamps. 500,000 people were receiving checks in multiple states. This is systematic fraud on a massive scale.
States have always needed to hand over at least some sort of SNAP data to the federal government, but this call from USDA really just takes it a step further. So it's not exactly like a simple standard request, because they're asking for a full caseload of personally identifiable information. So what does that mean? That means like names, social security numbers, birthdays, addresses, pretty much for everybody who gets SNAP benefits.
This is the first thorough request of its kind, and it's causing a massive legal battle. 28 states and Guam have provided the files, but 21 states, led by, you guessed it, California, are refusing to hand over the data. They're claiming privacy concerns and urging that the USDA is overstepping its legal authority. The states with the most fraud are the ones fighting hardest against the oversight.
This is a new day, and President Trump promised as he was traveling across the country over the last few years that it would not be the government that we know, including the fraud and waste and abuse. And so at USDA, we are hyper-focused on rooting out that waste, fraud, and abuse.
The SNAP program cost about $110 billion annually. If 20 to 30% of it is fraud, that is $22 to $33 billion in taxpayer money being stolen every single year. Now, let me explain the difference between what Davis did, insider fraud, and other massive problems plaguing the SNAP program. External fraud through card skimming.
Millions of federal taxpayer dollars earmarked for families stolen in minutes.
And it's leaving some without funds to put food on the table.
It was exactly $1,111 that they took, the full amount within minutes of it being loaded on there.
In 2024, states reported about $250 million in stolen SNAP benefits through card skimming. But USDA estimates the real number could be as high as $12 billion a year. Here's how it works. Criminals use card skimmers to clone EBT cards, then drain the account within minutes of the benefits being loaded. Kenneth Driscoll, who relies on SNAP benefits, had his entire $1,000 stolen within minutes of being loaded. 2 months later, it happened again, $264 stolen, leaving him with only 44 cents.
Georgia is leading the country at $23 million stolen. And our investigation exposes how the crime is connected to other states.
Transactions at markets in Philadelphia, Tampa, Miami, all part of the same criminal networks. The technology gap is killing the program. California became the first state to fully deploy EMV, chip and tap EBT cards in January 2025. The chip cards are much harder to clone than the old magnetic stripe cards. But most states are still using the vulnerable old technology, leaving millions of recipients exposed to skimming.
Transnational criminals have really taken over.
As part of a crackdown on SNAP fraud, the USDA joined the Secret Service and Homeland Security to search for card skimming machines across the country.
Fraud is an absolutely big business right now. During an August operation in Atlanta, agents found dozens of card skimmers in less than 2 days. This is organized crime on a massive, massive scale. Here's what some politicians and bureaucrats don't want you to understand. This isn't a victimless crime. Yes, the government loses millions and millions of dollars. Yes, taxpayers are funding the fraud, but the real victims are the families whose benefits are zeroed out at the grocery store checkout. And here's the policy cliff that makes this even worse. Federal reimbursements for stolen SNAP benefits expired late 2024. That means in 2025 and beyond, if your benefits are stolen, they're likely gone for good. States aren't required to reimburse you, and most won't.
SNAP is one of the largest safety net programs in the country.
Yeah.
It begs the question, how much is this costing taxpayers?
Quite a bit of money. So the federal government spent about $99.8 billion on SNAP last year, meaning 2024. It's obviously a massive program that serves about 41.7 million people a month.
There's also new work requirements that went into effect earlier this year, requiring most able-bodied adults without dependents to work about 80 hours a month to stay eligible. The Davis case shows that the Trump administration is serious about cracking down on fraud. From her arrest in May 2025 to her sentencing on December 22nd, 2025, the message is absolutely clear. If you steal from this program, you're going to face the consequences. The SNAP fraud crisis is just one example of how government programs have become targets for organized crime when there's no accountability and no oversight. Davis worked in the fraud prevention division and became the biggest fraudster. States with the highest error rates are fighting hardest against federal oversight. Transnational criminal organizations are running sophisticated skimming operations across the country, and 186,000 dead people are still receiving benefits. This is what happens when government programs grow so large and complex that nobody effectively monitors them. The SNAP program serves 41.7 million people and costs $100 billion annually. At scale, with that much money flowing through the system, it becomes a magnet for fraud. Secretary Rollins says this is just one of many investigations to come. The Trump administration is conducting a systematic review of federal programs to root out fraud, waste, and abuse. The SNAP program is just the beginning. The question is whether the 21 states refusing to provide data will continue to protect fraudsters, or whether they'll finally prioritize the families who actually need those benefits over the criminals stealing them. America, when the person catching food stamp fraud is running a $66 million food stamp fraud herself, you don't have an oversight problem. You have a systematic corruption problem. Davis got 24 months and a $36 million restitution order, but she was just one employee in one division at one agency. How many other foxes are guarding how many other hen houses across the federal government? The 21 states refusing to hand over SNAP data aren't protecting privacy. They're protecting fraud by stealing $12 million annually from families who actually need help. California leads the resistance while also leading the nation in benefit theft. That's not coincidence. The Trump administration just proved they'll prosecute government employees who betray public trust. But the real test is whether they can force blue states to stop protecting criminals bleeding taxpayers dry. Let me know what you think about this. Drop it down in the comment section down below. Smash the like button if you kindly would. Share, subscribe, and as always, guys, I'll catch you on the next one.